All right. Well, hi, folks. Steven here. So, this is going to be another one of our discussions of Pokemon side game music. You may remember back in, I guess it was March, we talked about the music of Pokemon Battle Revolution, the first Wii Pokemon game. Actually, a fairly early game on that system in the grand history of things, such as it is. Tonight's discussion that we're going to record is about the music of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of, let's see, what is it? Time, Darkness, and Sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit unusual in that there is a third version there. Let's see here. So let's see. Anne, why don't you give a little update about what's been going on there? We'll see. Give folks a little bit of chance before we start our actual recording. Go ahead with that.
Yeah, sure. So, I run a Pikapi Podcast, a Pokemon anime podcast. Currently, we're trekking through Advanced Generation. The episode going up shortly is another filler one. But like all Pokemon episodes, I read way too much into it, and we get to talk more about Ash's conception of romance and why Brock has ruined it for him. So look forward to that. See, on my Patreon, let's see, we put up our movie discussion from Coco, and following that, I believe in a few days will be some digital prints of Bob Ross style Pokemon paintings. So that's some fun things to look forward to. And yeah, that's what's been going on my front.
All right. Just to let you know, just to check it, Anne, is my audio coming through nice and clear? You're breaking up a little bit there. I don't know if we need to adjust it.
Your audio is coming through clear for me. Breaking up like as in my internet is bad, or breaking up.
It's like we're getting dropped like frames or whatever on your side or whatever like that.
Oh, okay.
I guess one thing you could try doing is changing the resolution on your webcam there or whatever to drop it down a little.
Sure.
Especially since I've got you in a pretty tiny window that we're not going to be able to see the full resolution anyway.
Right. Okay. I am in low definition. So.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of little cracks and pops in your audio, which just seems to say that. Sorry about that. Hopefully it's a little better for them than it is for you, but that's okay. We had kind of the same problem last time. I know we can't always control how reliable the internet is and stuff like that. And sometimes they change stuff on StreamYards and sort of take care of that. As far as stuff I've been doing, let's see, last weekend I went to the Midwest Gaming Classic. I did a recap video of that last Monday where it wasn't as a press person, so I didn't take as detailed stuff in there, but I did pick up a few things at the convention and stuff like that. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. But otherwise, this is going to be pretty much one of our standard side game music discussions. Like I said, we're discussing the second set of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. These are the ones that were released in 2008 or 2009. So we'll be talking about, like I said, Time, Darkness, and Sky. Just a quick word of advice. If you want to pick up a copy of one of these, Sky is available on the Wii U eShop. And I strongly recommend, because I know it might be this week, or sometime later this month, that they're making it progressively more difficult to add money on there and to buy things. So you definitely want to make sure that you get your stuff going there if you can. All right. So, fair warning that we'll definitely mention that in the actual audio we record, but I wanted to make sure I called that out here. I did make a point yesterday on my 3DS of purchasing a copy of Detective Pikachu on the 3DS, because eventually we're going to discuss the game at some point. As far as episodes, last month I sort of did a lot of catch-up. I got out like both parts of the... I got out the Anime Milwaukee episode that I got out there. And I also got out both of the parts of the movie discussion, so I'm a little more current now. on that, but still some stuff in the backlog that Ann and I are working through, so that's good. Yeah, not too much else going on musically in the Pokemon franchise right now. One thing that's kind of important, I guess I've been following, is that I don't know exactly what their process is, but Warner seems to have been adding a lot of their old Angela Villa stuff. Remember Angela Villa did a song for both the first and second Pokemon movies. Back in March, they added Catch Me If You Can. And they also added a single of hers called I Don't Care. Just a week or two ago, they added another one of her singles, her most famous one, Picture Perfect, and I'm hoping Wonderland is somewhere in that plan to be released, slash the Spanish, as well as the Spanish version, Mundo Magico, would be kind of nice. So we'll have to see if that happens. But otherwise, not expecting a ton, especially, well, E3 itself was canceled, but Nintendo should be doing a thing next month. And I'm sure they'll have some Pokemon stuff to announce there, and we'll see if anything specific comes of that. But otherwise, I think we're about ready to go ahead and get started with our actual discussion. For those of you who don't know how this works, let's see, let me boot up my voice recorders here so that we're right on that end, is that we sort of have a set format when we discuss these side games. We sort of do an introduction, we talk about our experience with the games initially, and sort of we pick out a set of songs. We each pick out 3 songs for a total of 6, which is, to be honest, kind of woefully inadequate for this set of games. There's a lot of material we could talk about with this, and maybe we haven't decided. When we get to this part about our next episode, we're not sure exactly what we're going to do with part of that. But there's a ton of material here, so feel free to shout out any songs you have that we don't mention or don't get a chance to fully discuss. We're very aware that there is a ton of great material in this game, as there is with pretty much all the Mystery Dungeon games. All right, so I think we're just about ready to get started. Ann, are you okay on your end?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to get this recording started on my end. We'll leave a pause. I'll do an introduction, and we'll sort of just proceed from there. Actually, let me make sure I want to try and start these both at the same time. All right. Okay. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Ann from Pikapi Podcast. And in our continuing series of Pokemon side game music discussions, we've come to the second, I guess you could call it, set of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, Explorers of Time, Explorers of Darkness, and Explorers of Sky. Kind of a little bit of an unusual relationship between these 3 titles. They decided to go the route they do with sort of the main series games. Let's see here. Sorry, 1 second. So, not unlike other sets of games from that era for the mainline series, they decided to go all the way out and have 2 versions and then a 3rd version with this second round of Mystery Dungeon games. And we're very, very excited to talk about the music because there's a lot of great material and we'll unfortunately only be able to get to a kind of a fraction of it. But like the first set of Mystery Dungeon games that we discussed back in 2021, this was produced by Chunsoft, or Spike Chunsoft, as you may know them. As far as the release, these are 4th generation games. So in Japan, Time and Darkness, which were the first 2 to get released, were released in September of 2007. Let's see, North America was April of 2008, Australia was June of 2008, and then Europe was July of 2008. And like we said, this sort of got I guess you could say, the platinum treatment, because there's actually a 3rd version, this one, Explorers of Sky, and that was released in 2009, regardless of where you were. In Japan, it came out in April. North America was October. And Australia and Europe, different weeks, but both in November of 2009 is when Sky came out. And just a quick little public service announcement about this game. when we're recording this, the Explorers of Sky game is available on the Wii U eShop if you want to pick it up that way. It's considerably cheaper than trying to get a used copy of it. However, over the course of 2022, the Wii U eShop is going to become progressively more difficult to buy things on, along with the 3DS eShop. So definitely recommend that you try to get these any way you can. All right, well, let's see. As far as the first experience with these games, I had known that the first two games, which were Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team, had been fairly successful and had definitely resonated with fans. They were, at that point, forget exactly the sales numbers. It depends how you break stuff down and whether you count the two games together, or in this case, the three games together, how well. But they both sets of games sold on the order of what like the original Pokemon Stadium on N64 did, which was at the time of that, the highest selling Pokemon side games, and these matched or beat it. So very, very popular there. And I was very excited to pick these games up. And it seems you had a somewhat different experience with this game, because actually you did play like the original Red-Blue Rescue Team, one of those at least, but you have yet to give the later ones a shot. Not to say you aren't a true Pokemon fan, but what's kind of the deal there?
Well, we all know my heart is with the anime. I'm not a gamer. I've just never played this one. I did enjoy the first Mystery Dungeon, but I've just not gotten around to it. So I've been experiencing this one on Let's Play in preparation for this discussion, and now I regret all my life choices because I am in love with your partner Pokemon. In my Let's Player had a Vulpix, and I feel like I must protect it with everything I have. So I will be playing this game someday, soon I hope, but unfortunately I have not actually played it as of yet.
Yeah, and I guess I should say I picked up Explorers of Time of the original too. I didn't feel a need to... actually, let's see. I'm not even entirely sure if I got that right. Okay, let me restate that. And when the original pair came out, I picked up one of those. I think it was Time, but it might have been Darkness. I'm not entirely sure there. In any case, I didn't really have an intention to pick up the third version, Sky, until I found out it had a jukebox feature called the Sky Jukebox that you unlock through later in the game. And this was back, of course, when I was running PIRN, and having a built-in feature where a built-in sound test that I could use to sort of extract the music and get it on the station more easily was a big help there. So that's kind of the main reason. There's also some other bonus content with Explorers of Sky. They added a fair bit of value there and also tweaked a few other things with the game, even though the main game, like I said, it is the platinum of that set of Mystery Dungeon games. All right, well, as far as the musicians that were involved with this game, it has some of the folks from the original Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team. Notably, it has Arata Iyoshi, who worked on Beatmania and Ninjala, and also has some solo work. It seems he's more of a contract worker. And then there's about 5 different new folks that we have on there. Let's see. Since there's so many of them, some of them are credited as like sound design or sound direction, and some of them are listed as composers, and the credits actually vary slightly between the first 2 games, Time and Darkness, and the third game, Sky, has slightly different credits, even though the same names are listed. Let's see. Let's go over a couple of them. Hideki Sakamoto I have down as being someone who's worked on the Yakuza series, Attack of the Friday Monsters, and also, I guess, worked on the song Lifelight, which is one of the major themes of Smash Ultimate. And did you have anything on that particular person?
Not a ton on him. I do have some on some of the other names on this list, though.
All right, well, let's go on to Kaisuke Ito. Hopefully, I'm never sure about these Japanese names. I think I've gotten better with time, but he worked on Yakuza 3, Let's Stained Ritual of the Night, and also worked on Smash Brothers on the theme for Galim and Dark Horror, or Darkon, I'm sorry about that, which are two of the major bosses of the story mode in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So that's pretty big there. I don't know if Anna, you had anything to say on that particular one.
Yeah, I've got an article here that kind of breaks down the credits a bit. It is like, I'm not entirely sure how verified this information is, but I do kind of have some suggestions that Keisuke Ito has been doing a lot more of the arranging than the composing. So that might be where he was in his career at this point in time anyway.
And then we have Kenichi Saito, who has worked on a couple Sonic games, including Sonic Unleashed, Mad World, and Devil's Third. One thing I'm noticing here is actually that a lot of these folks do have credits on some games targeted at a much older age range than the Pokemon franchise. I can definitely say that about Mad World and Devil's Third, that's for sure. Anything on that particular one?
Yeah, just kind of he just seems to do a lot of video game stuff. We've talked a bit about Arata Yoshi's kind of does a lot of freelance work. I think I can't find like a particular agency that Kenichi Saito is listed with. He may also be doing a lot of freelance gaming work too.
All right. Ryoma Nakamura. Let's see. I found a couple interesting credits here. Fatal Fury, Wild Ambition, and Zero Escape. I don't know. Anne, did you have... first of all, thanks to you for looking up so many of these that we had. I mean, with such a huge soundtrack, it's not entirely surprising that we have so many names to go over. It's not quite the same story as, say, like the Pokemon Stadium games where they went through a couple iterations, but I do appreciate all the research you do on this and other parts of our discussions.
No worry. Yeah, and like the interesting thing about Ryoma Nakamura is that it appears that he kind of changed jobs between Time and Darkness and Explorers of Sky. It looks like he started out kind of with the composing arranging team, but then moved into sound director or the sound director team rather for Explorers of Sky. So congratulations on your promotion, I guess. But that's cool.
Yeah, like I said, the credits are a little bit different between the versions of the game. I had to do a little digging to find the credit sequence, which is very similar, but lists the names a little bit differently for Time and Darkness. Let's see. Next one you got is Misaki Okibe. Not sure exactly, but it looks like they're listed under the original Persona back in the 90s and something called Billion Road, among other credits. And what did you find on your end?
I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of another situation where we might be like converging two people with these names, because they're like. But if I am correct, I think this might be the only woman on the team. But yeah, no, she has a lot of credits for. As directors, as composers, editorial department, for a lot of different games. Fossil Fighters Frontier, I've never heard of that one, but Shin Megami Tensei Persona, like I've never played it, but I've heard of that one. So yeah, no, she's got a pretty good career going, it looks like.
Yeah, Fossil Fighters is sort of You've heard the term Pokemon clone. It's kind of like Nintendo's own attempt at a Pokemon clone. It's got some, like it uses some of like the touchscreen and microphone mechanics of the DS, if I remember correctly, and stuff like that. So that's what that one is. I think I remember seeing that on the list. And then we've got one more name that, speaking of conflating different folks there, let's see. Yoshihiro Maeda? I'm not sure exactly. Unfortunately, there is someone by that name who's pretty famous, but it's probably not the person we're looking for. Anne, did you have any more luck figuring this one out?
I unfortunately could not find a ton amongst the MMA fan community, where there is also a Yoshihiro Maeda who is crushing it apparently. But the most I can find on him is that he is only working on Pokemon Sky. Like he was not working on Explorers of Time and Darkness, but contributed to tracks for Explorers of Sky. So that's the best I can do for now.
Yeah,
it was a pretty deep hole we had to dig through.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Yeah, there is a fair amount of new music for some of the bonus content in Explorers of Sky, both some of the post-game content and also the chapters that are added that explain some of the side characters and their backstories. And there is some new music there, so presumably they may have had some of the same people working there, but it's possible they did bring in someone else with that. All right, well, that is an absolute boatload of folks that it took to put together the soundtrack on this game. But as far as like the overall style, first of all, we should probably mention that, Red and Blue Rescue Team was a cross-platform game of sorts. They're both Nintendo systems, but there was one version, Red for the Game Boy Advance and Blue for the Nintendo DS. This time, all three games are strictly Nintendo DS games, and that may have made things a little bit easier. I'm not entirely sure, since they didn't have to worry about porting the tunes back and forth between the different types of hardware. So that may have proved beneficial, or at least made things easier. The other thing, this is like they're called Time and Darkness and Sky, but I think time is sort of the lead factor here, because the plot of the games, which we will spoil to some degree at various portions throughout the discussion. There's not really a way around that. But being a time travel-based game, it's not surprising there are a lot of clock sounds in various tracks, and we'll be definitely pointing some of that out. I assume, Anne, that was something you noticed in the soundtrack as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it kind of a mixed bag, but yeah, like a lot of kind of mechanical-like, very almost synth meets steampunk kind of sounds. And then, of course, especially makes sense for Sky, like a lot of almost Celtic-like sounds, or medieval melody-type folk music rendered through very synthetic keyboard sounds with like the Vox synth voices underneath to kind of add a flying or floating type feel. So it's a very different soundtrack in a way that I really quite appreciate.
Yeah, so definitely some interesting stuff there. Of course, there is still a pretty good variety in here, just because, of course, the different dungeons in the game cover a lot of different environment types. All the stuff you'd usually expect: mountains, valleys, forests, rivers, all that type of stuff is in there. So as a result, you do still get a pretty good variety. But a lot of the more plot-focused music which happens to be what we've picked out for the most part, definitely uses a lot of time and clock metaphors. All right, well, we've done what we usually do here. We've each picked out 3 songs, which, yes, admittedly, in a soundtrack such as this, much like the problem we had with the Red and Blue Rescue Team Mystery Dungeon games, is kind of an inadequate number, but we don't want to be here all night on this one. We will mention some of the tracks we are not going to be able to do a full discussion on later, because there is a ton of material, ton of stuff we could have picked. Feel free to share some of your favorites, and maybe we'll pick 1 or 2 after we've gotten through ours to at least briefly discuss. But let's see. So I picked, On the Beach at Dusk, Amp Plains, and Time Gear, there's kind of like 2 versions of it in there. So there's like a remix version, which is what you actually hear first, and then just a Time Gear. And we'll sort of talk about those as sort of one track there. And what were the 3 you picked?
I picked I Saw Something Again, Planet Paralysis, and It's Not a Miracle.
Yeah, so let's see. I guess I did want to kind of note, It's Not a Miracle is actually one of the songs from, I keep wanting to call it DLC, but no, you paid full retail price for Explorers of Sky if you bought it originally to get the additional content there. But it is part of the additional content in Explorers of Sky. We've arranged these in sort of chronological order. There's a little bit of fuzziness in there, and we won't be going quite through the usual back and forth like we usually try to, but we're going to start with one of my songs, which is On the Beach at Dusk. So this plays, as you can probably guess, pretty early in the game. It's when your partner Pokemon finds you awashed on the shore of, wherever this game kind of takes place. And it's this song that plays there as the sun is setting. And, it really does kind of strike you as soon as you hear it. It's one of the first really, truly original songs that you hear in the game. As far as, like, the instrument stuff, it's got, I think it's supposed to be a harp. These are all synth instruments on the DS, so it's a little hard to tell sometimes. But it's also got some strings and horns and stuff in there. What kind of struck you, Anne, about this when you heard it?
Yeah, so it's very soothing, very evocative of the bubbles that are being blown by, I think, the Krabby or something. But what I love about this track is about, 20 or so seconds in, a woodwind or a horn comes in on the melody. And, it just adds a different dimension to the track. And it kind of feels like it keeps growing and evolving over time. And so I really liked that aspect to it.
Yeah, sort of the one-word description I put down was contemplative or contemplative or however that's pronounced, because it does sort of make you think a little bit as the sun is setting and stuff like that. And isn't this something kind of unusual or strange or interesting that's happened? It sort of fits both with, your character washing up on shore and also what your soon-to-be partner character is going through. They're trying to work up the courage to apply at the guild over on the hill there to become part of I don't know if it's technically called a rescue team, but you kind of get the idea. I also wanted to say that there's a bit of a floating or tidal quality to it, which makes sense based on the setting, but also, we talked about the bubbles the Krabby are blowing. Bubbles can, if there's a sufficient amount of wind and stuff, can sort of bob up and down as they float across. Anne, is that something you noticed as well?
Yeah, the synth keyboard choices they made for kind of the underlying undulating, not exactly bass, but the, atmospheric synth or what they were using, just very much sound like kind of brought to mind the sense of bubbles floating and bobbing and I don't know. I just thought it was very well done. It fit what was happening on screen.
And then I forget how far into it, but the Mystery Dungeon theme, the theme of the sub-series does show up again in this game a number of times, and it shows up in this track, which I guess just kind of lets you know that, yes, this is a Mystery Dungeon game, just musically, although I think there is some of that in the intro sequence and whatnot. I assume you noticed that as well, Anne. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely slower than the way it's usually done because it's not supposed to be a super fast track. But overall, I think this does a pretty good job of setting up the start of the game story. And I assume you have a fairly similar opinion there, despite having not really played through the game yourself and just kind of watched it.
Yeah, I love that the Mystery Dungeon series kind of has the confidence to come in on a kind of cooler, as you say, contemplative track, just kind of without feeling like it has to go hard, da-da-da-da-da, we're a video game. I don't know, there's just something kind of very refreshing about this series, that it has just a very different tone, different themes sometimes, a different pace of gameplay. And I think the music really supports that, and I like that a lot.
All right, well, let's move on to, I think this is maybe the only dungeon theme that either of us picked, which is kind of a shame because there's a lot of great dungeon themes in this game. So, And I wish we could go over more of them, but the one I picked is Amp Plains, AMP, and it's obviously an electric dungeon. In other words, there are a lot of lightning or electric Pokemon running about in there, along with a few other types, of course. As far as the music that goes with that dungeon, very synth-based, very electronic. Even for a sample-based thing like the DS, you can definitely tell that was what they were going for. One thing that really caught me about it was sort of the bass line that goes through like the first section of the tune there. I think really gives it obviously a very strong beat, but that's one thing that made it stick out to me. Anne, what were your kind of thoughts on this track?
My main thought was that this track sounds like a Mario game, like completely. I definitely feel like the electric vibe they're going for, like the instrumentation is like, again, just kind of slightly more skewed towards kind of this kind of more futuristic, funky, like electronic sound feel, but it sounds like a Mario game to me. And I'm kind of surprised that as we went through that long list of composers and arrangers that we didn't find a ton of people who worked prominently on Mario, because it feels like they're really pulling from that well.
Well, I did compare it to a Nintendo game, but it definitely was not a Mario game. The one I actually came up with as a comparison point is a game called Galactic Pinball, which is a game, and you're probably not familiar with this one because it's a Virtual Boy game, first of all.
But I can see pinball in this soundscape. That makes sense.
Yeah, so Galactic Pinball is the name, or Space Pinball as it's known, I think, in Japan. There really were only early Virtual Boy games, so that system, crashed and burned after less than a year, really. But the games themselves are generally actually decent, at least. But this is obviously a pinball game themed around space with a couple different tables. And it's hard to kind of characterize the Virtual Boy sound hardware. It's almost kind of like a doubled set of Game Boys type stuff. Very advanced, but still very chiptune-y. And I feel like this particular song reminds me a lot of that, and that is probably part of the reason I like it. I mean, I do think it is very well composed. Like I said, I like some of the instruments they do there. There's also some nice drum work in there as well. So that was one thing that made me pick this out of, several dozen probably dungeon themes. There's also most of the dungeons that are long enough have a second segment that has a slightly different version to some degree or another. And there's something called like the Far Amp Plains track that also uses some of the same stuff, but also is kind of its own thing with this. So definitely wanted to mention this one. All right, well, let's go on to Anne's first pick. This is definitely more of a story-focused track. I Saw Something Again. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this and how it gets used in the game?
Yeah, so going off my faulty memory, I believe that this track is kind of used during when you're meeting an explorer named Dusk who kind of talks about like seeing through time and a dimensional scream, and like a character like sort of blacks out and comes to, or like starts feeling dizzy. So a lot of weird is happening. But what I love about this track is that it's kind of very horror movie evocative of it's kind of got a lot of haunted doll vibes to it. It's very delicate synth bells under some very minor chords, and some chords that don't really seem to be going together the way they should. It's just like all slightly off, but very pretty. So again, it's just kind of like definitely used in the game to show that things are not quite right and things are not what you think they are, and you need to be on your guard.
Yeah, sort of the one-word description I have for this is disorienting. The dimensional scream, I guess, is sort of a ability that your character has, that when certain things happen, they will get a sensation and a brief like snippet of like the future or something like that gives them sort of an alternate perspective on what's going on in the scene there. I think the first time you see it is when you encounter a drowsy or something like that. And yeah, like I said, disorienting. There's also seems to be a winding noise. We had mentioned that there's some sort of like clock-like sounds in there, and this one has a winding noise that goes through it. I think I assume Anne that you noticed that as well.
Yeah. This is kind of another one of those tracks that just kind of has like mechanical like sounds, like if not actual sound effects, but like sounds that kind of suggest, again, like a turning, or like it sounds like one of those like snakes that you pull the wooden stick across to kind of make a thing. Yeah, like, so again, just very interesting choices of instrumentation that are very effective.
Yeah, I forget what type. It's some sort of percussion thing, and I forget exactly what like the instrument or technical name for it is, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Also, as a lot of the sort of time-based tracks here, there's some chimes and some bells in there, so that sort of completes the sort of picture that we have in our mind, I guess you could say, of that. And like I said, it serves a storytelling purpose, both musically. So it sort of fulfills. I'm trying to think of how I want to transition here. Just give me a second to think. So it sort of completes the package is sort of the best phrase I can come up with right now for that, but it does fit how it's kind of used there. All right, well, let's talk about another one of my tracks. This is called Time Gear. Now, there's kind of a couple different versions of it. There's the first time you hear it is actually called the Time Gear Remix, and then there's also another track in the sound test, the Sky Jukebox, called just Time Gear, that actually shows up later in there. So that's kind of a little odd that you would hear them in that order. But one thing I kind of noticed about it, number of structural things, like it seems to be in 3/4 or 6/8 time. Which, I think is probably not that uncommon for when you want to give a sense of time in a piece. I mean, obviously meter is very important in pretty much all music. But in this particular case, it seems like when you really want to emphasize the passage of time or something like that, I don't know if this is really a thing, but it just seems to me like you use a lot of 3/4 time and stuff like that. Like as far as the instrumentation, it uses bells and sort of a clock chime. It's not the... you may remember back when we talked about some of the GameCube games like XD and Coliseum and stuff like that. We had mentioned that one of the areas, I think it's in Gale of Darkness XD, uses a variation of the Winchester chimes. That's not quite what this is. It's either some other thing or it's a rearranged version or stuff. But Anne, I assume you kind of noticed that particular detail of it.
Yeah, and it's like 3/4 time is very, like, it's a waltz rhythm, and so there's something about it that just feels very circular, in a way that's, just slightly different from like 4/4 time or other time signatures that you could use. So it kind of just definitely feels like things are revolving. Which works very well with the chimes in there. So you're very onto something there. I also really love, like, all of these tracks make use of synth voices, but this one, they kind of stood out to me a little bit and like just kind of added a mysterious undercurrent to what is a very playful melody, I think.
Yeah, definitely some choir there, and some. I put down the words back and forth, which I think is very common to kind of a lot of the plot-based music in this game. But I kind of wanted to mention sort of the function without getting too deep into it. Is the time gears sort of keep the flow of time regular in various areas of the world. And when you first hear it, it doesn't have much of a real melody to it. And then when you hear the version later in the game, there is more of a melody to it. And I think that gives a little bit of a feeling of like time is starting or getting back on track again, which I think is something that we'll come up to in some of the other tracks that we've picked here. But very important stuff. But overall very important track. It's kind of hard to do justice to it with words, but certainly did give it our best shot there. All right, and let's go to your second pick, which is The Planet's Paralysis, which is, like we said, we mostly ended up picking up story-based tracks here rather than dungeon tracks. Not that the dungeon tracks are bad, but a lot of the story-based tracks are very memorable. Why don't you talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, this is memorable is the word for it. The Planet's Paralysis comes in hard. It's like the lowest track in terms of like bass and lower frequencies. It's just comes in with low chords. There's drums. The synth breath noises. This is another place where the use of synth voice stands out, because you can very much hear someone taking breaths and like, again, using human voice as part of the soundscape, I think is a very cool choice. But yeah, this track just kind of conveys a very different mood than many of the other tracks, because as terms of story, like this is where stuff is getting real. Like Dialga's here, the temporal tower is like they're going to the top of it. Like just everything is happening. This is kind of not the climax, I guess, but around it. So yeah, it's just a very powerful track, and again, still feels like it fits the orchestration and the mood of the rest of the soundtrack, but it's so very different, and that's cool to me.
Yeah. Spoiler alert for a story involving time travel. Dialga is involved in the story. And actually so is Celebi. We'll talk more about that in our game discussion in the sort of the post segment. But as far as the song, I noticed immediately the low droning sound that comes right in the beginning. And then you have building instruments as well as like heavy drums. So it definitely gives somewhat of an oppressive feel. I think this one might come in a couple places. I forget if when one of the characters is describing sort of the dystopian future that exists there, and sort of this is part of it. I forget exactly when this all plays in, but it definitely fits sort of that future you're trying to fix and improve and stuff like that. All right, and we're going to go straight to your third pick, It's Not a Miracle. Now, just to point out, we mentioned that the third version in this series, Explorers of Sky, had some bonus content. First of all, there's some bonus post-game content centered around Shaman, but there's also these 5 or so stories that you unlock throughout the course of the game that go into some of the other characters in it. And the very last one you unlock involves Grovile and Dusknoir going through sort of the some of the effects of what you did during the main story of the game in the future. And one of the tracks that plays there towards the end of that is called It's Not a Miracle. And why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so I picked this because I liked the sound. This is one of the ones where, like, because I haven't played the game, I'm not entirely sure what is happening in the scene under which it plays. But this track has such a sad tension to it. And I want to believe this game like has happy endings, but it's Mystery Dungeon series, so I know it has the power to break my heart. And this track like makes me feel like I want to cry, or like it has the power that it could make me cry very easily. It feels like saying goodbye to a friend. So hearing that Grovile and Dusknoir are going through like your personal effects after you've theoretically gone, that sounds very sad. But it's soft and it's delicate and it's slow. Again, there's synth voices underneath this beautiful melody to make it just a little bit haunting. It's just a very nice track.
Yeah, definitely. This plays, like I said, towards the end of that arc. Anne's characterization, I will tell you were a little bit off in terms of what's going on in there, and I don't want to totally spoil it since we're not doing the. We will talk more about the story in our post game discussion. But this actually
someday, so like this is good to know.
There is a little bit of a relief, I believe, aspect to this song, if I'm remembering correctly, how it is used in that epilogue chapter there. But so I'm not sure I want to divulge all the details, especially since I'm not 100% sure I have them all quite right. But it is, I mean, I would never say the music in this game is under-emotionalized or whatever you want to call it there. I don't even know if that's a word, but moving to tears, there's a lot of music in this game that has that effect on folks. And, you know, so that ties into the story, but the music, I think, also fits that extraordinarily well. Variety of emotions, really, throughout it. All right, well, that was just sort of a small sampling of the tracks. There's so much more stuff that if we had more time and weren't trying to also sort of squeeze in a game discussion as a bonus segment that we'd love to go over, just a few of the tracks I kind of wanted to shout out to. This Andrico is in the chat room and gave us a virtual hug. Feel free to mention any specific tracks there. But in any case, but yeah, that was 6 tracks is really not enough to cover this, you know, in its entire. Sorry, but 6 tracks, it doesn't really do this justice. I mean, there's a ton of other stuff we could have gone over. We had mentioned that Diago is kind of it's the end boss of the main story, at least. So the final battle theme, Diago's fight to the finish, is another great one. Try to think of there's a fair number of good dungeon themes, which I guess we haven't done too many of them here. But there's also stuff like Defend Globe, which is part of one of the Explorers of Sky bonus chapters, deals with the origin story of Guildmaster Wigglytuff when he was a child. And there's a great theme there. There's also a group of 3 Pokemon called Team Charm, and they have a theme in there. Like, I'm trying to think of titles at the moment. For some reason, some of them escape me. But there's so much music, so many songs we could cover. And it kind of shows in just the number of folks that they brought on to do this, that it takes that many people to produce a soundtrack that's this expansive. Yeah, certainly a lot of stuff in there. If you ever get a chance to listen to it, like I said, I strongly recommend it if for some reason you haven't done so yet. But there are a fair number of sound effects and other stuff. I think those might be a little bit better, but they're still pretty similar to what you got in the previous game in Red and Blue Rescue Team. So why don't we sort of give our overall impression? I sort of, sort of tipped my hand a little bit just back there. With just listening out all those tracks, there obviously a lot of great stuff. We had mentioned, like I said, a lot of the sort of clock mechanics, the clock winding noises and bells and stuff like that. I did kind of want to compare it to other like time travel based games, of which there are a number of good ones, also some not so great ones, but one very good one, at least in my opinion and a lot of other folks, is a Super Nintendo game called Chrono Trigger. And some of the music in this game, it definitely has its own identity, but there were definitely parts that seemed kind of musically, like they didn't seem like they were lost tracks. It's kind of hard to describe in words. But there's ones that gave me very similar vibes and feelings, even though the melodies were original and stuff like that. And I don't know how much experience you have with Chrono Trigger, but and its music. But
Chrono Trigger, but like I've heard some of it, but not super. Like I've never played it, but like that is an extremely popular game. Like I have encountered music or cosplay and things like that from it. So.
Yeah, not entirely surprising, and I'm sure the Japanese folks who worked on the music for this game, a lot of them are familiar with that game. It's a very popular game in there. Excuse me there. Sorry about that. It's a very well-run game, both for its gameplay and for its story and for its music. And I like if I had to put this thing closer, like it's not certainly, like if we go to other sort of fictional stories around time travel, gaming and otherwise, I don't know that it comes as close to say something like Ocarina of Time or Back to the Future or stuff like that, other time travel based, games or franchises or stuff like that. I think, but it is still sort of its own thing. It also stays true, I think, to the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon in particular vernacular, but it does seem to have some similarities there. And any other sort of thoughts overall? I'm sure, most folks, you're absolutely a fan of the soundtrack of this, but any other thoughts of your own?
Yeah, I just really have loved the plot of this game, in specific the characters. As I mentioned, I've not played this game myself, but in watching the Let's Play, immediately, I am in love with your partner Pokemon. I'm intrigued by how that might change, because in the beginning, which Pokemon you are, which I think would determine what kind of partner Pokemon you get later. I would assume that affects it. It's determined by you answering a bunch of questions and then touching the pad. So it's I'm intrigued by that, and to see if you have a different personality of your partner Pokemon every time. I don't know. So just the plot of this, I think, is why most people come to Mystery Dungeon. The gameplay looks fun, but it's just a fascinating story, and it's full of heart. I can't say I'm a great expert on how it compares to other time travel. But I did just play Kingdom Hearts.
And sorry to interrupt you. You kind of,
sorry.
I think you misinterpreted. We'll talk about the game compared to other stuff in our game discussion, but I meant specifically for the sound and music. How you think it compares to other? Did you have any other thoughts you wanted to share? Why don't I try and rephrase that and reprompt? This happens, sure. Folks. It's okay. I'd rather have too much than too little, but all right. I guess, Anne, did you have any other thoughts about the music that you wanted to share?
Just that it feels like there's something very unique and purposeful to this game. I guess purposeful is probably the best word to use, because there's a lot of stuff that evokes clocks and mechanics, and that kind of tie into the time travel. There's a lot of stuff that evokes wind and sky. They never lose those two themes, even when you're in an electric dungeon or underground in a cave on the beach. So I very much like the deliberate efforts of this music soundtrack to not only create a cohesive whole, but also to really evoke the variety of the specific things that are happening in the moment.
Yeah, you can go pretty deep with this game like that. They definitely knew what they were doing, what they wanted to do with it, and were able to sort of translate that over to the sound design and music and stuff like that. So definitely a very good tying, I guess you could say, of all those things together. All right, well, we've got a few more things to talk about here. First off, I do have a little bit of feedback, so let me just go ahead and punch up a little presentation here, and we'll sort of talk about it. All right, well, like I said, we couldn't get to every song we wanted to, and I think we've had to double the number of selections we had just to do a fairly decent job. Well, let me rephrase that. Well, like I said, we could only get to so many songs in here. There's a lot more we could have picked. So if you have any that you want us to sort of bring up, you can always give us a comment, pokepress@gmail.com, or you can try and find us on Twitter. Or you can leave a comment on one of these videos, and we will try to get that into a future discussion. In the meantime, I do have one comment here that I want to get in here. So, the weekend before we recorded this, I had an opportunity to go to something called the Midwest Gaming Classic. This is an annual, when we don't have major world disruptions, convention that takes place in the Milwaukee area pretty much every year. like I said, when we don't have major disruptions. But I went to it last weekend, and I wasn't there as press, but I decided I would do a bit of a recap stream afterwards, sort of talking about my time there. I have this comment from Nathan Rabe. I'm not sure exactly if I got that last name right. Sorry if I didn't. But nice recap. I was there and experienced a lot of the same things you did. It was great to meet David Wise and my favorite YouTube personalities. For those not aware, David Wise is a longtime video game musician who's been working in that industry since the 1980s. Best known for his work over at Rare in the 80s and 90s, including on several of the Donkey Kong Country games. He was brought back for the Tropical Freeze game to work on music for that. Ton of other credits to his name, and it was neat to see him there. My response was, thanks, glad I finally have an opportunity to do these again. And what I wanted to bring this in for was not so much to talk about the convention itself, but sort of the fact that we're here in 2022 after a couple of years of off and on and mostly off. We're finally sort of getting into the swing of being able to go back to events like these, and I'm looking forward to later this year going to a couple of Pokemon tournaments. So definitely looking forward to that. And has your situation been, I guess you could say, clearing up? Now, of course, by the time this makes it on the podcast feed, hopefully things are still on that track. But how have things been sort of settling back on your end, I guess, is the best way I can put it.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of less events. It is definitely starting to open up again. Some of the ones that I usually go to have been canceled. Like there's a cute little convention called FanCon that like keeps trying to go and then goes away. We'll see how this year goes. Bonsai kind of fell through last year. But again, we'll see how it goes this year. But FanX, I think, is still going strong. So that was the last one I went to last year. And hopefully as the situation keeps improving over here in Northern Utah, like that one will be able to also go this year and be a nice, bigger, better show, and we'll all get to have fun together again.
Yeah, so like I said, I mentioned, some of the stuff. Let me see. Yeah, winters may still be tough for the next year or two, but after all, back when I went to Anime Milwaukee back in February, they had a pretty strict mask mandate. That's why if you listen to that episode, our voices sound a little bit muffled through most of it. This one was a little bit less restrictive, but yeah, it does seem like things are getting back online, I guess you could say. So hopefully more of that in the future, and I hope to get to do more of these recaps over the next few months and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what's our next discussion going to be? Well, we go in North American release order, and judging from the information I was able to find, the next one that comes up is My Pokemon Ranch. And if you're looking at the slide on here, it says My Pokemon Ranch plus ? So as it turns out, My Pokemon Ranch, it was an Umbrella-developed game. They're the one who made stuff like Hey You Pikachu, Pokemon Channel, Dash. Eventually would go on to make the Rumble series. So this was, My Pokemon Ranch was a kind of a utility program channel you could get on the Wii, where you can store a large number of Pokemon. You would get certain bonuses, you get a new Pokemon each day and stuff like that. As it turns out, it doesn't have a ton of music in it. There's only about half a dozen or so songs, so it seems fairly clear to us that although the music is worth talking about, it's not something that's going to fill up a whole episode discussion like we usually try and do. So we're sort of open to ideas. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to do with the other part. We did this last year when we talked about Pokemon Troze for the DS, which had somewhat of a different problem. It had a minimal soundtrack, but that's because all of the tracks were like 20, 30 seconds long tops, and that didn't give us a ton to talk about there. In this case, we do have songs of decent length, but not very many of them because of the small nature of this piece of software. So we have some, what we believe to be some additional time we'll have in there, and we're looking for something sort of filler there. Ann and I have discussed a few things, one possibility is that we might talk about a few additional songs from the Explorer's Mystery Dungeon game, since we sort of admitted that we didn't have enough slots since we sort of, as we sort of said there, 6 is as much as we could cram into this discussion, but we would love to do more. So we're sort of debating about what we want to do there, but look for that in the future. Until then, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks. Okay, so that takes care of our main part of our discussion. So what we are going to do next is we are going to leave a bit of a pause here, and then we're going to do a game discussion for a little bit here. I have a fair number of notes. Now, obviously, Anne, you did watch this game being played. You did play the previous one, so I've tried to make sure. So this sounds like a motorcycle out there on your side. But
yeah, I might have to rethink putting my computer in this room now that I can hear the road so vividly.
Yeah, it all depends on what's going on out there. But basically, I have a number of points up here. It's sort of going to be one of our usual game discussions where we talk about everything besides the music and sort of what we think there. But Anne, obviously, you're at a disadvantage with not having really played this, but we'll give it our best shot anyway. We're going to run to that into future sometimes, too. But yeah, so leave a little bit of a pause. Let me get a little bit of water here, actually, and then we'll go into our game discussion.
What? La di da da da.
All right. Leave a little bit of pause and we'll sort of go from there. All right. Well, with the music portion, I guess, kind of done there. Let's see. Sorry, that wasn't quite the intro I wanted to go with. Give me a second here to think. Okay, well, we definitely alluded to other aspects like the game and stuff like that. Sorry, this isn't quite right. I'm trying to think of a good transition here. Okay, well, the music is one important aspect of the game, but there's still plenty of other stuff in there. Let's sort of talk about the mechanics. Technically speaking, I don't know that there's a ton that's changed since the prior Mystery Dungeon games. Now, this is a Gen 4 Mystery Dungeon game as opposed to a Gen 3 Mystery Dungeon game. So a lot of the updates from Gen 4 are obviously new Pokemon. I believe they implemented the physical special split that's in there. We don't have new types because that won't happen until Generation 6 when we get Fairy, but we still have the gummy system for increasing various Pokemon's intelligence and making their AI a little bit smarter. The structure of the game is still pretty similar. I don't know, Anne, when you were watching playthroughs of this game, did it just look like more like a fresh coat of paint, or what was your sort of thoughts there?
Well, I can definitely see a lot of the criticism that, game critics gave it of, the gameplay is very much similar, and, a lot of things I see are recycled and repetitive, unoriginal, but, actually watching it, again, I was in love with these characters and the story, very quickly, and so I can also see why the fan response is this is a classic, this is a work of art, people love this game, and I played the first Mystery Dungeon games and I liked it a lot, but clearly it was never a priority for me to be okay, we gotta make sure we play the next one. Now I'm why haven't I played Explorers of Sky or Time and Darkness? So yeah, no, I don't think it's as simple as a fresh coat of paint. The gameplay again is very similar to the last games, but there is something new and wonderful to discover here, because I don't feel like we play Mystery Dungeon because we're so in love with this amazing gameplay. We play it because there's an amazing story and amazing characters. So yeah, those are my thoughts there.
Yeah, I think some of the other aspects of it. I mean, Pokemon side games are often seem to have like you either get it or you don't with certain
Yeah.
aspects of it. Like going back to like Generation One, like Pokemon Snap, like that either sounds really cool taking pictures of Pokemon and getting evaluated on them, or it sounds really pointless to a lot of some other folks. Like similar things with Hey You Pikachu is sort of the epitome of that. It's something you either clicks with you or you don't. And I think I can see some similar stuff with the Mystery Dungeon series, even though mechanically they do share a lot with the mainline games, and not quite the same way that something like Legends Arceus does. The most recent, it's considered a mainline game, but it does sort of rework the gameplay a fair bit in that one. In not it's not a great comparison maybe, but I kind of wanted to just throw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. You had mentioned the story and characters, and I'll definitely say this game nails the characters within the world very, very well. Some of them are repeats. A lot of the folks in like Treasure Town, I don't know if they're canonically the same people as there were in Red and Blue Rescue Team, but they definitely have similar personalities and similar roles in there, with a few additions. You got the Kecleon shopkeepers and Kangaskhan storage. They have a different person running the bank and stuff like that. And then Wigglytuff, who was originally running the friend areas in Red and Blue Rescue Team, is now the guild master and has a very interesting personality as the de facto leader of the organization in the game. What did you think of him?
I loved it. It just, I don't know, it felt like, I don't, kind of a person who, like, didn't apply for the job, but, like, got promoted because they've been there all this time. Kind of, I feel like it's like nobody would have, like, looked at this and be like, yes, we're going to make this Wigglytuff, this personality, the person in charge. But it kind of feels like, just by the virtue of being there for so long and kind of proving themselves, they kind of made it despite all odds. Kind of a feel like, I don't know, there's something beautifully incongruent about having Wigglytuff as kind of the leader.
Yeah, and the guild has a number of other important characters, like obviously Chatot, who's sort of the second in command there, and then a bunch of other Pokemon that fulfill various roles within the guild. And then the going through the story, the basic gist of the story is that yes, once again you're a Pokemon that used to be a human that was sent to this world. In this case, you were sent back in time. And apparently you had a Grovyle, who we see a few times early and then becomes a major part of the story. What did you think of that character?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. It's just a really interesting kind of wrinkle as you're playing through. Like, you meet Grovyle and, like, they're a thief. But then you kind of have like a booster gold situation where it's like, I'm actually from the future and I have this mission that nobody knows about. And then like, just like, gosh, it's just, I liked Grovyle a lot. Like, not in the sense of like, as a person, I want to hang out with them, but like just for what they brought to the story, because you have this, you just have this journey going through trying to catch a thief, which is always like a good like heist-esque cops versus robbers kind of story. But like just keeping on interacting with them, even as like the greater story, like they are the tower of the temporal tower is like falling apart, and they need the time gears to save the world that Grovyle has been stealing. Like, and you kind of learn from Grovyle how to save the game. Like I said, it's just a lot of complicated characters, a lot of complicated story, and like working together, and getting to interact with these people that are not two-dimensional.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that a lot of the characters have sort of a what feels like within the realm of a Pokemon game, more of a defining, motivation and stuff like that. In Groval's case, it really wants to mean something to the world and do something to better the world, even if it won't. Because of the time travel stuff, it's implied that some of the characters will cease to exist once things are righted. And even if that happens to it, it is okay with that, which is kind of neat. And there's all sorts of other... We mentioned Dusk, who is one of the villain characters in this game. There's also, oddly enough, there's a couple of Pokemon. There's a Coughing, and I forget what the other one is, a Zubat. And they're called Team Skull, years before Sun and Moon. There's also the pink or shiny Celebi shows up in this game as sort of Grovil's sort of like friend/love interest, which is kind of interesting. And, that obviously, you can't really, there's not really a modern way to get a shiny Celebi. So the fact that it shows up here is very interesting. And, obviously it also, I don't know if it was intended as a direct reference, but it does show up in Secrets of the Jungle there as well, so which is kind of interesting. So yeah, and then there's all those side chapters in Explorers of Sky, which is some very nice content there and some really great stuff. Especially like I said, the fifth one, the last one that takes place in the future, where, like I said, some of the stuff you did in the main game starts to have an effect there without spoiling too much. Also, like I said, the one with Igglybuff, Guildmaster Wigglytuff as a child, is another interesting one. They all have good points to all of them. There's a couple that focus on let's see, I think there are 5. There are 2 more that focus on some of the guild members, Bidoof and Sunflora, and then there's one that focuses on Team Charm, a small group that shows up partway through the story in the main game, but in Explorers of Sky has their own chapter there.
Team Charm is an awesome name. I want to bring that back.
Yeah, a lot of these characters do wind up getting alluded to or have references to them, or even show up in some of the other in one of the later Mystery Dungeon games that we'll talk about in the future. As far as the game structure, we had mentioned the mechanics are a little bit different, but not as much as you might think, especially if you've played some of the newer games. If you're comparing this against, the original Red Blue Rescue Team, not the remake, and then going to this one, they're maybe not as different. You mentioned critics were a little bit down on it. They were especially down on Explorers of Sky for that reason. But one thing I wanted to mention is at the end of the game, there's a couple different dungeons you go through, and it takes quite a while to get through all of that. And you're kind of limited in your options and stuff, as opposed to in the Red Blue Rescue Team, the last dungeon in the main story, Sky Tower, a little bit of a spoiler there, is just one dungeon that's 20 some odd floors. This one has twice that you have to go through, and where you have to go through all of that in order, along with some story segments. So that might be a little overly long. I don't know if you watched that part of the playthrough, Anne.
It's not ringing any bells right now. I'm looking through my notes, but
yeah, the part in this game I'm referring to is the Hidden Land, Hidden Highland, Temporal Tower, Temporal Spire, and that's all you get. You have there are sort of checkpoints there, but not exactly. It's hard to explain sort of exactly what's going on. But it's a longer final path through the game. The other dungeons seem to be fairly consistent in terms of their length compared to the previous one, but that one I think maybe wore on some folks, especially depending on your team combination, since you were a little bit limited in what you could take there. All right, well, we had mentioned several times that the first Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, Red and Blue Rescue Team, got a remake a couple years ago on the Switch. I guess we should say, personally, as far as this set of games getting a remake, I think it's probably a better idea to do something original with the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon franchise and maybe come back to that later. And I'm not sure what your thoughts are, having watched a playthrough of this game. whether you would want to see this there. What are your kind of thoughts?
Like on the one hand, I want to see it ported to the Switch just because it would be easier for me to acquire and then play it. But I do agree in the sense that like the Mystery Dungeon series is really good, and I love everything. Like I love, even when I don't play it, I love the ideas that they come out with. So I would very much like to see them do something new as well, and just bring more into this spin-off franchise and kind of take us on a new adventure. So I could go either way. I'd be very happy to see it remade for the Switch. I'd be very happy to see it left where it is and something new take its place.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice that they kind of have to make there. Like I said, we don't really know what, if anything, they're going to do, especially since we've got some new mainline games coming out at the end of this year, Scarlet and Violet, which seem to be taking up a lot of the oxygen. And some of the stuff they introduced last year, like Pokemon Unite, is still going very strong in there. So I'm not sure if there's a spot until maybe at least next year for another Mystery Dungeon game, but it'll be interesting to see. I guess we had discussed back in our Red Blue Rescue Team discussion. We had mentioned back in our Red Blue Rescue Team discussion the possibility of, if you're going to adapt a side game into a movie like they did with Detective Pikachu, Mystery Dungeon sales-wise is still sort of the king of that, unless you're going to like do a documentary on Pokemon Go or something like that. I don't know, Anne, have your thoughts changed? I think we had some thoughts back when we discussed Red Blue Rescue. I'm curious where you are right now on that idea.
Nah, I still agree. Like you could do a CGI animated of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon or a live action blend. Like the story is just like it is its biggest selling point. Whenever anybody tells you about Mystery Dungeon or why you should play it, the story is what they bring up. And I think Time, Darkness, Sky just kind of keeps on going with that. It just shows that this series has legs, and a movie franchise with it would be there has the potential to be very powerful, very beloved, and also to kind of, if they wanted, in the same way that Detective Pikachu kind of does, it doesn't just play to little kids. It also plays to slightly older kids and teenagers, and even a lot of adults. We really loved Detective Pikachu because it could have, again, some themes that didn't just apply to kids. And Mystery Dungeon series is another one. Explorers of Sky, is another one that you could make it more palatable to a slightly different audience than maybe some of the other Pokemon games, movies, anime series, whatever, cater to. I think there's so much potential. There's so many different ways to go with it, and I'm surprised they haven't kind of capitalized on it yet. But since Detective Pikachu has done so well, I would be surprised if we didn't see some sort of something movie related created with the Mystery Dungeon series as a base.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder if they maybe considered it, but thought that, well, if we do a movie with talking Pokemon, maybe that'll be easier to see what the appetite is for that before we do a movie where every Pokemon can talk. So that's sort of consideration there. As far as the storyline, if I had to pick one specific entry in the Mystery Dungeon Pokemon, if I had to pick one particular entry in the Pokemon Mystery, if I had to pick one particular entry in the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon subseries to adapt, it probably would be this one, just because of some of the opportunities and stuff like that. Obviously, you do kind of have to condense the story down a fair bit into something that'll fit into an 1.5 to 2 hour movie. They could also go the route where they take the basic framework of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon and bring in some of the recurring characters and kind of go that way instead. And sort of create an original story based on sort of the template there. But it's an interesting possibility, and we still don't know what the next Pokemon movie is. I had thought that maybe it was because it had some sort of tie-in to Scarlet and Violet, and they had to reveal some more information about the games before they could do anything with the movies. But, well, we're just sort of hanging out there for now.
As often seems to be happening with the movies of late.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. Okay, I think that is good for a discussion there. All right. As far as our game discussion with all of that. So I think that worked out fairly well. So let's see here. Before we head out, thank you very much to everyone who sat through sort of the whole thing in there. Really appreciate that. If you have any comments or any other track, like I said, we are still trying to figure out what we're going to do with what we believe to be the extra time we're going to have. Like I said, it's another one of those games where the music's, with Pokemon Rants, the music is worth discussing, but it's not substantial enough in terms of content to really feel a whole episode. Even if we do like a game discussion there, I mean, it's kind of minimalist by design. Because it's like the predecessor to, all the other stuff like Pokemon Home and things like that. So it's a little bit of an odd thing that I think we do want to talk about. Like, it's not like the Pokemon Mini stuff where that was mostly second generation. That may be one reason there weren't very many second generation side games in terms of like actual like system-based games. Because those are so simple, a lot of them don't even have much in the way of real music. This is one where, like I said, with Troze, where there is music, but the structure or amount of it makes it difficult to do a full discussion on, like we normally would. But, yeah, that's mostly what I had to say. Anne, did you have any other parting thoughts?
Not really. Just like, I mean, wouldn't it be surprising if we somehow managed to talk for an hour about those tracks, even despite all odds? But no, I look forward to anybody's ideas about what we could do to fill the time for the next episode. If not, we will come up with something ourselves. But
yeah, a lot of the ideas I have are stuff that takes kind of a full episode, like discussing Smash Brothers Brawl, or doing one thing I want to do in the future is a music from non-Pokemon Game Freak games. This is stuff like the Mendel Palace, Tembo, Pocket Jockey, and stuff like that. Non-Pokemon games. Harmonite, although we would exclude the actual Pokemon music that's in that game from it, would sort of be one of the ground rules there. But we are looking forward to hopefully doing that in a future discussion. But that is really like a full-time discussion. So yeah, if you have any ideas or stuff like that, please let us know. But yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, folks.
thank you.